Dorothy Cale had worked at the Halvern Foundation for 18 years, and in that time she had learned to read a room the way a sailor reads the sky, not by what was said, but by what changed when certain people entered it. When Mr. Cale Vaughan came to review the annual accounts, the building changed. The receptionist sat straighter. The junior staff found reasons to be elsewhere. Even the old portrait in the second-floor hall seemed to pull back slightly against the wall. Dorothy herself felt it, a tightening in the chest, a precision in her movements, a quiet awareness that every word she said would be weighed. She had met powerful men before. She had never met one quite like this. He was not loud. That was the first thing people got wrong. They expected a man of his standing to fill a room with noise and demand. Instead, Mr. Vaughan was very still. He listened more than he spoke. He asked one question where another man would have asked 5, and he held the answer in his dark eyes for a long moment before responding. The loyalty around him, the 2 men who stood at the edges of every meeting, the quiet efficiency with which arrangements were made, told you more about his reach than any display could have. Dorothy understood it plainly. Here was a man whom the world had learned, through long experience, not to test. She did not know, that Tuesday evening, that the woman who would undo all of it was 2 floors below her, alone in the archive. Marin Doss had been hired 3 years ago to catalog the Foundation's correspondence, a project that no one else had wanted, housed in a long, low-ceilinged room beneath the building with fluorescent lights and 12 steel filing cabinets and no window to speak of. Dorothy knew her in the way you know someone who does quiet, necessary work without complaint, a nod at the coffee station, a brief exchange by the lift. Marin was somewhere in her late 20s, plainly dressed, with careful hands and the particular patience of someone who spent her days sorting through other people's words. She was not the sort of person Dorothy thought about when she thought about the Halvern Foundation. She thought about her now, because at 6:20, an hour after the building had emptied, Marin appeared at the door of Dorothy's office, still in her cardigan, holding a sealed envelope. Dorothy looked up. She had been about to leave herself. "I'm sorry to keep you," Marin said. She didn't come further into the room. "I found something." The envelope was ivory-colored, thick stock paper, the kind that cost money. It was addressed, in a careful hand, to Mr. C. Vaughan. In the upper left corner, a name Dorothy didn't recognize, Renz Vaughan. The postmark was 11 years old. It had never been opened. Marin explained it quietly. She had been working through a donation crate, one of several that had arrived mislabeled from an estate clearance 18 months ago. The crate had been logged as miscellaneous correspondence from a business donor, already archived without detailed review. She had been working through it systematically, as she worked through everything, and this envelope had been inside, tucked between 2 folders of annual reports. Misfiled. Overlooked. Sitting, sealed, for 11 years. "I don't know who Renz Vaughan is," Marin said. "But the name on the front is Mr. Vaughan's. I looked him up. I needed to confirm whether to forward it to the main office or send it to a family solicitor." She paused. Renz Vaughan was his brother. He died 10 years ago. Dorothy felt the weight of it settle over the room. The letter was written 6 months before that, Marin said. It was never opened. He never received it. The sensible thing, Dorothy would think about this later, turning it over, was to hand it to the Foundation's director in the morning, let the institution manage it through proper channels. The sensible thing was to document it, write up a note, and go home. No one would have faulted Marin for that. No one would even have known. "I'd like to take it to him tonight," Marin said. "If you have an address." Dorothy looked at her for a long moment. The archive was Marin's world. The world above it, the men, the power, the rooms that changed when he entered them, was not. "You understand what kind of man Mr. Vaughan is," Dorothy said carefully. "Yes," Marin said. "That's why I don't want to leave it until morning." Dorothy gave her the address. She did not sleep well that night. The building that housed Mr. Vaughan's private office was in the older part of the city, a stone-fronted block with a discreet plate beside the door and 2 men in dark coats on the steps. Marin had taken the train. She told the men at the desk that she had something for Mr. Vaughan, personal correspondence belonging to him, found in the Foundation archive, and she would wait however long was required. She gave her name and her position and sat down on the bench in the entrance hall and settled her hands in her lap. The envelope was in her bag. She had wrapped it in a piece of clean paper so the corners wouldn't catch. She waited 40 minutes. Another man came out and looked at her once, and she looked back, and he went away again. Then the man at the desk told her to follow him. The office was on the 4th floor, at the back of the building, a quiet room, wood-paneled, with one tall lamp burning in the corner and a wide desk that held almost nothing on it. Mr. Vaughan stood when she entered, which surprised her. He was taller than she had expected, and he wore his suit as though it were a second skin, not for effect, but because ease of that kind was simply what he was. He did not offer her a seat immediately. He looked at her with those careful dark eyes, and she felt, very precisely, the weight of his attention. "Miss Doss," he said. His voice was even. "You work in the archive?" "Yes, sir." "You've been there 3 years." He had already had her looked up, she realized. Some time between her giving her name downstairs and her arriving here. She felt no alarm at that. It was simply what he was. "Yes," she said. And then she told him. She told it plainly, without drama, the way she would have explained a misfiling to a colleague, the donation crate, the mislabeled estate clearance, the envelope that had been folded between reports and overlooked for a decade. She told him the name on the return address, and she watched his face, and something happened in it that she did not expect. Not anger. Not grief. Something more complicated, a stillness inside the stillness, as though a word he had carried for 11 years had just shifted position in his chest. She set the envelope on his desk. "I haven't opened it," she said. "I wouldn't. I couldn't leave it in the archive. And I didn't want to route it through the director. It seemed like something you should have." He looked at the envelope for a long time without touching it. "You've read about my brother," he said. Not an accusation. A statement. Only what was public. To confirm the address. "I didn't read any of the Foundation correspondence about him, if there is any." She paused. "That wasn't my business." He looked up at her then, and she held his gaze, because she was a woman who did her work with care and had done nothing wrong, and she was not in the habit of looking away from men who watched her to see if she would. "Why tonight?" he said. "Because I thought about leaving it until morning," she said. "And I couldn't." He was quiet. She waited. A man like this, she understood, did not fill silence reflexively. He used it. And she had learned, in her years among other people's correspondence, that silence after a difficult truth was not a problem to be solved. "Thank you," he said, at last. The 2 words were very quiet. She heard something in them that she thought she recognized, not quite relief, not quite grief. Something older than either. She told him she would find her own way out, and she left him there with the lamp burning and the envelope on the desk in front of him. She did not know what he read that night. She thought about it on the train home, what a man like that had carried, without knowing what he carried. 11 years of a silence that had hardened into fact. A brother who had died, and the last distance between them that seemed, now, to have a different explanation than the one he had lived with. She thought about the letter sitting in a mislabeled crate for 10 years while he went on building his empire and his silence. She thought about the fact that he was, underneath the power and the stillness and the careful dark eyes, a man who had been alone with something heavy for a very long time. She was not a woman who borrowed grief. But she walked from the station to her flat in the cold and she thought, "I hope it helps. Whatever he reads. I hope it gives him something back." Dorothy arrived at the Foundation the next morning at 8:10, as she always did, with her coat still on and her keys in her hand, and found Mr. Vaughan in the entrance hall. He was standing with his coat folded over his arm, speaking quietly with the receptionist. 2 men waited at a respectful distance by the door. It took Dorothy several seconds to understand what she was seeing, because men like Cale Vaughan did not appear in the entrance hall of charitable foundations at 8:10 on a Wednesday morning. He looked up when she came in. He said good morning, and he thanked her for the address. "I'd like to see Miss Doss, if she's come in," he said. She had. Marin was already downstairs. Dorothy could hear the archive light buzzing through the open basement door. He went down the stairs himself, without the 2 men, which Dorothy noted, and she did not follow. She stood by her office door and kept very still, which was a thing she had learned to do in 18 years when something important was happening in a room she wasn't in. She heard nothing. The archive was too far below for voices to carry. What she saw was this: 7 minutes later, Mr. Vaughan came back up the stairs. He stopped on the landing and looked at her, and he said, quietly, without ceremony, that if the archive needed additional resources, she should contact his secretary, and whatever was required would be arranged. That Maren Doss's work was valued, and he hoped the Foundation understood that. Dorth said that she would pass that along. He nodded once. He put on his coat. He was nearly to the door when he stopped and turned back, and what she saw in his face in that last moment was something she had never seen on him before: a loosening, very slight, around the eyes. Not softness exactly. Something prior to softness. A man who had, very recently, put something down. "She's remarkable," he said. "She didn't have to come." "No," Dorth agreed. "She didn't." He left. The two men followed him out to the black car at the curb, and the door closed, and the entrance hall was quiet again. Dorth stood there for a moment in the particular silence of a room after something has shifted in it. She thought about what she had told Maren the night before, that she understood what kind of man Mr. Vaughan was, and what Maren had answered. She thought about an envelope sitting in a crate for 11 years and a woman in a cardigan who had worked late and found it and decided she could not leave it until morning. She thought about 7 minutes in the archive, and a man standing on a landing telling her, in his precise and careful way, that an overlooked woman's work was valued. In all her years at the Halvern Foundation, Dorth had learned to read what mattered by what changed. What changed that morning was this: the most powerful man she had ever known had come to a quiet building in the early morning, gone down a flight of stairs without his people, and stood in a low-ceilinged room under fluorescent lights for 7 minutes with a woman who had simply refused to let him carry a grief built on a lie, and when he came back up, he was, if only by that slight degree she had noticed around his eyes, lighter. She thought that was worth noting. She went into her office. She made a note. And downstairs, in the archive, Maren Doss pulled the next folder from the next crate and began, in her careful and patient way, to do what she had always done, to treat every piece of paper as though it mattered, because once, a very long time ago, someone had trusted it with something real. She did not know what it had meant to him to read it. She knew only that she had done the right thing, and that was enough, and that it had always been enough for her.